just a couple bad weather fans representing New York, talking all things sports. Man, what could go wrong? We got Alex, who's a fan of the Knicks, and Mike of the Nets. The yin-yang of the tri-state, place your bets on the Yankees, Giants, Mets, or Jets. Yeah, you should listen if it's sparking your interest. If you made a vow to your team, don't break it. Bad weather fans is the relation.
That's right, this is Bad Weather Fans, episode number 254. Mike Biseglia, Alex Vanessowitz, and we are presented by DraftKings. Brooklyn Nets, tough loss last night against the Washington Wizards on the road. The Knicks, 2 straight losses, big weekend for them. They fall to the Cleveland Cavaliers. They fall to the Boston Celtics. And is the earth falling on the Knicks, as some fans believe? Alex has his opinions on that. As if you're watching this on YouTube, there's just not a random man driving his car in the bottom square here. That's Evan Roberts of WFAN, afternoon host, with Tiki and Evan. Hey, Alex, how are you? And Evan, drive carefully, please.
Yeah, Evan's rant yesterday caused quite the stir on Knicks Twitter, so we wanted to get him on to, further clarify or give his opinion further on that, because some people did not agree. I agreed, and I loved it. That's why I posted it. So what are your thoughts for people who say it's a loser way to think that the Knicks should just hope for injuries in the playoffs? And because my guy Nickinator on Twitter, he's a big Knicks fan, big friend, has been on the show, didn't like your rant and said that it's a way to be I don't know if it's fugazi, but it's more of like playing soft, like you're just hoping for injuries, like kind of a thing. So how do you feel about that?
That's not what I'm saying. Okay, I'm not saying let's just sit and put our fingers together and pray the basketball god everybody's gonna get her point. And I've learned this lesson the hard way, is that February is not May, and that a lot can change. Obviously, right now, the New York Knicks are not on the level of the Boston Celtics or the Cleveland Cavaliers. I don't think anybody is disagreeing with that. I don't think you're disagreeing with that. But the point I'm making, it's actually a very simple one, but Knicks fans in general can be stupid, let's be honest. They live in the now. Kind of like last year when you guys were the best team in basketball in January, and I was saying the exact same thing. Hey, that's great, you're the best team in basketball in January. Does that mean that come April and May, this is exactly the same? Injuries are one aspect of it. Obviously, yes, one thing that can greatly impact Boston is they're not healthy. But the overall point is the way you're playing in February is not the same as the way you or they are playing in May. And so maybe it's because I'm in my 40s now. Maybe it's because I've watched a lot of garbage basketball, some decent basketball, some tease basketball. I've watched all kinds of basketball. One thing I've learned is if you try to make decisions on what's going to happen in May based on what happens in February, that's my overall point.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that, Evan. We'll turn your camera off for a second as you froze.
You turned your own camera off.
I turned my own camera off. Producing live here on the Zoom, it's not working. But you did mention about last year when you had the same point, and I actually had a similar point on your regard. Was all right. It's February, but Knick fans were saying, look at what we did when we just got OG. We are going to the finals. No one can stop us. And you had the same point. So it's funny to me. And I'll use Alex as an example. When you made that point last year and could not disagree more with Evan, but now this year, when the point is in your direction, you've done a total 180 on it when it's literally the same exact point where, hey, yeah, I see what the Knicks are doing. They're awesome right now, but let's wait till May. It's the same exact point with a completely different narrative. So it changes the way in the Knick brain it views this argument when it's actually the same thing.
Yeah, well, they were riding high, and it was a new team. That was the thing, So go ahead, Evan.
Right, and now they're riding low.
No, that's not what it is. Here's what it is, and I know we're on the same side right now, but Knick fans, they have like this weird, they got some mental issues when it comes to sports, okay? We're still, and I mean that with peace and love.
Oh, yeah,
We're still kind of in this new world. This new world of winning for the New York Knicks. I mean, it was a very long time of being bad and being pathetic. And so you're not used to this whole thing. And by the way, neither am I. My team sucks. I want to complain about their effort against the Washington Wizards on a Monday night. I mean, give me a break. But Mike is right. My point last year, and I think I learned this the hard way. I think where I really learned it was back a decade ago when the Nets swept the Miami Heat in the regular season. And that was the Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett Brooklyn Nets. And it created this belief of, oh, well, we beat them 4 times in the regular season. You know what that means. Yeah, it meant dick. Let's be honest. They lost in 5. It was the weakest 5-game series loss you'll see. Darren Williams couldn't score a goddamn point in game 5 of that series. And so what it taught me is I love the NBA. I'm like you guys. I watch every freaking game. And so I know that me saying I love the NBA and then basically telling you it doesn't mean anything in the month of February feels like a contradiction. It's not. It's just the reality of the sport that we live in. And so last year, you guys were very giddy over the way you were playing. I don't blame you for being giddy, but it gave you this fake kind of sense of, wow, we can beat anybody. And I think this year, the opposite is occurring where, look, there's no doubt that your efforts against 3, and it's not even 5 teams, it's 3 freaking teams, one of which is in the Western Conference. So let's not stop acting like the Knicks can't play against good teams. They can't play against 3 freaking teams, really 2 teams, because to me, the Thunder are completely irrelevant. They're a Western Conference team, and if you're playing them, have a goddamn parade, because that means you're in the NBA Finals, all right? And trust me, you won't be worried about the Thunder if you just got past Boston and Cleveland. So I think it's this overreaction to the now. And I think we need to take a deep breath and realize that the now isn't necessarily what's going to happen when things really matter in April and May. But yes, to Baseglia's point, you're all a bunch of hypocrites.
Well, not me, of course. No, I'm kidding. But to your point, and I have 2 things to say to that. Number one, the NBA playoffs, it seems like it's always chalk. It's rarely chalk. You see, last year, the Mavs as the 5 seed got to the finals. The Celtics played a bunch of injured teams and got to the finals. You know, the 2 seed didn't get far. You know, things like that happen every year. Or the Heat got to the finals as the 8 seed as a play-in team got to the finals. You know, the Knicks in 2021 swept the Hawks is my other point. And they lost in 5 in the first round. We went into that series like we're going to kick their ass. They stink. And then, you know, Clint Capella crushed us and crushed our dreams. And Frank Ntilikina got crossed into oblivion by Trae Young on a game winner. And, you know, even in other sports, you see like the Mets last year, they lost to the Phillies in the season series, and then they beat them in the playoffs. The Jets in 2010, they went into Foxborough and lost like 102-7, and then they come into the playoffs and they beat them in the playoffs in New England. And, you know, it doesn't matter in the regular season. It matters to a point where it's confidence, it's continuity, and learning how you can match up. Like you look at the undefeated Patriots playing the Giants in that Week 17 game, and the Giants lost, but they gave them a game, and then that gave them the confidence that they knew that they can beat them in the Super Bowl. Like it matters to a point, but it's not the end all be all that Knicks fans are making it seem like because you lost 7 separate games before February 24th. It's just like, give me a break. Like, let's calm down. Let's pump the brakes. Yes, it's concerning. Yes, it's upsetting. Yes, it's annoying. Yes, I don't like getting punked on national television twice in 3 days, but come May, none of this matters. It's a new season. Just throw the ball up and let's see what happens.
And look, that's the reality. The thing that we have to battle, like if we're being real, is all right, what are the biggest flaws with this team and how can they fix that before May? And some of the flaws that they have, I don't know if they're able to fix. Like to me, their biggest issue is that their 2 best players don't defend at a high level and they get hunted out in big spots in Jalen Brunson and Karl-Anthony Towns. I was giving it thought though, because I started to think, all right, let me think of other teams whose 2 best players are liabilities defensively. And believe it or not, I came up with a recent team that had great success, last year's Mavericks. I mean, think about it. Their 2 best players are Luka, who apparently is too fat to be on the Dallas Mavericks, so they needed to rush and trade him away. Yeah. And, of course, Kyrie Irving, who I think I will say about Kyrie, getting to watch him all the time, I think he's actually a little bit underrated defensively. I'm not going to tell you he's, Gary Payton in his prime, but I don't think he's as bad maybe as some
He's
people.
so quick. Yeah, he can react.
Very.
If he needs to. Yeah.
But the question I think we have to answer is, well, how do they fix that? So I can sit here and tell you, hey, it's February. Don't worry, a lot can change, and a lot can change. But I wonder how the biggest issues facing the Knicks can change, which is the fact that their 2 best players, as brilliant as they are offensively, and they are brilliant, are they going to be able to defend enough in a best-of-7 series against a team as talented as Boston?
Yeah, it was weird in the Bulls game, and Mikal saved him up with the block at the end. But it was weird in the Bulls game because Anunoby was hurt, Hart was hurt, Brunson wasn't on the court, Towns wasn't on the court. So the last 5 for the biggest possession defensively of the game was Mikal Bridges and a bunch of backups, and it was just
DeLon Wright on the game also
weird optically to see that. And I can't remember the game now, but I had a I didn't think it was a great decision by Thibodeau when he took Brunson out with like 11 seconds left. Maybe it was the same game, and he left himself open where if the other team scores and they get the ball with like 4 or 5 seconds left, he's not on the court. And he made that decision.
It only works is if it only works, bro, is if they have a timeout. Like
they didn't.
I think it makes sense when you can go offense, defense, because their liabilities defensively. So you're putting a better defensive squad on the floor. But to your point, if you're left without a timeout and all of a sudden now you've got a big offensive possession and the king of New York, Jalen Brunson, isn't on the floor, you just cut your nose off to spite your face. So it's part of the risk. I think Thibodeau's trying to coach around it. But that's tough to do. Like, it's going to be very difficult to beat Boston and win an NBA championship if that's the ultimate goal, when you've got to coach around your two best offensive players being liabilities defensively.
And I know for me, I would like anything more than to just rip Mikal Bridges and everything about him, the way he bailed on the Nets, and now that he's on the Knicks, the trade involved. But Evan, from your eyes and watching all these games, and I know he's coming off the injury, so maybe that has a big part to do with it. But seeing the way OG Anunoby has played this year, after getting paid compared to last year and now coming off an injury, it seems like he's a different player than what the Knicks got at the trade deadline or right before the deadline last season.
Well, I thought at the beginning of the season, OG was OG and he was well worth it. Look, you're going to overpay guys in the NBA. I think we just have to kind of live with it and not, be too married to how much the guy's making. But he played every game. And I was saying this on the air recently before his injury. He had already played the third most minutes of his NBA career. Because A, he was healthy, which was a rarity, and then B, we all know the deal with Tom Thibodeau. He's going to run guys into the ground. Obviously, coming back from this injury, it's only been a couple of games. I don't want to overjudge him, but they're going to need him to be a hell of a lot better. They need him to be that elite-level perimeter defender. Bridges is weird to me, and I don't want to get into the trade because you're all going to think like I'm being biased and I'm just trying to, kick you in the balls. Mikal Bridges is not the same player as he was with the Nets, and he's not even the same player as he was with Phoenix, and I can't figure out why. Like, explain to me why he gets to the free throw line as often as Ben Simmons. Like, let's start with that. Let's just start with that.
The mid-range pull-up. Yeah. Yeah. We lost you for a sec.
It's a stupid theory. Why that happens. Is it the amount of games he's played? Is it the amount of minutes he's played? Is he just afraid of contact at this point in his NBA career? But to be averaging 1.1 free throw per game makes absolute no sense. And then his defense hasn't been – like, his defense has been good in moments.
Right.
Obviously, you look at the final play against Chicago. I mean, tremendous.
And against the Nets, too. The block at the end against the Nets moments as well. Yeah.
1,000%. The block on
Right.
Dennis Schroeder, killed me. So he's had his moments, but if we're being honest – for most games, has he been the defensive stalwart you thought he was going to be? I think the answer is clearly no.
No, definitely not. And I think, he's not Will Chamberlain. He's not the best defensive player in the history of the sport. But Mitchell Robinson is an elite shot blocker, an elite rim protector in this game, and an elite offensive rebounder as well. And I think having him on the floor will help the perimeter defenders defend more aggressively and better because the players can't drive the lane because they have to worry about Mitchell Robinson. Towns is not scaring anybody down low. He's just blocked some shots because he's tall. Mitchell Robinson is legitimately changes shots. And it will help the perimeter defenders, in my opinion. And that's why I can't wait for him to come back. And that's why losing Hartenstein was big, because now this roster is flawed, especially if Mitchell Robinson can't get on the floor. We thought we'd get him back in December, and now it's going to be March, But at this point, just get healthy for the postseason, and let's see what happens. So what do you think Mitchell Robinson will do for the Knicks when he comes back?
What is he going to do? You want to be honest with you? You're not going to like my honesty.
He's going to get hurt.
He's going to get hurt. And that's why I got to tell you, and I understand why you bring him up, because what you said is fair. Like, you miss him and what he can do for this team hypothetically. Mitchell Robinson is a rumor.
Right.
He's been a rumor almost his entire career. He does not play. And we have guys like this in every sport on all our teams where they're tremendous, but at some point you say, I can't rely on that guy. He never plays. So I understand, hey, when you're without OG Anunoby, boy, it's tough without OG. But when you're without Josh Hart, boy, it's tough without Josh Hart. I got to tell you, I'm sick and tired of hearing complaints about Mitchell Robinson. He doesn't play. You know what you're getting into. Now, I don't blame Leon Rose for losing Ihart. Obviously, the Knicks were capped out in terms of how much they could offer him. And to Ihart's credit, I know you don't want to hear this, he made a very good decision. He went to a team with a better chance to win an NBA championship. That's just the reality.
He did.
So I think it's one of those scenarios where there's no one you should be mad at. You can't be mad at him. You can't be mad at Leon. You can't be mad at anybody, right? Just the circumstances. But I am so sick and tired of hearing about Mitchell Robinson because everything you believe he can add to this team, he can for 5 minutes until he's hurt again. So if you're throwing your hopes on Mitchell Robinson being a defensive savior for your team, I think that's a big mistake because he has not shown, he has not earned the idea that he can be reliable enough to actually play 17 minutes a night throughout a playoff run.
For me, I think it's also I'm a 40-year-old Knick fan who's seen it all from the 90s all the way through now. And I have Marcus Camby PTSD, where he was hurt for about 2 years in a row, and then they trade him away for, what's his name, McDice, Camby and Nene trade away for McDice. And then Camby goes to Denver, leads the league in blocks, wins Defensive Player of the Year, et cetera, finally gets healthy and finally gets right. I have that fear that that's going to happen to Mitchell Robinson once they let him go or we stop relying on him and let him go. He has the ability. He is Marcus Camby, like 2.0 for this era. He really is. He can dunk on anybody. He can block any shot. He can grab the rebounds. He's that guy, So I think Marcus Camby is a little more coordinated offensively, but either way, and a better jump shot. I just feel that Mitchell Robinson is that guy, and I admittedly I think it's PTSD, and it might be a little bit more of the aura of him, and he's the longest tenure Knick, and I said basically watched him grow up. He was a part of the Carmelo Anthony trade, you know what I mean? So his pick, that was a throw in that second round pick. So I want him to come back. I know I have a soft spot for him, and Mike always teases me about it, but I do think he'll make a big difference, and I can't wait to see what it turns into.
I had a fear that Jacob deGrom was going to go to Texas and all of a sudden stay healthy. I was wrong. So,
well, they won a World Series, though. So I mean,
with him on the sidelines drinking Gatorade,
right?
But I get that fear. I just look. I didn't think you were going to trade him at the trade deadline. I didn't think his value was high enough. So it's not even about should you trade him, should you keep him. It's more in the moment. I just don't think you could trust him, and I don't know how anybody would be able to.
I put a question on Twitter yesterday, Evan. And I asked if the 2023, 2024 Knicks played the 2024-2025 Knicks, who would win, and you said the Knicks would win in 5. That's the 2025 Knicks. So this current season. Yes. Which team though? So I get you. You think the Knicks would win in 5 versus last year's Knicks. But which of those two teams would you think has a better chance to beat this year's Celtics? If you had to pick one to go into Boston in a best of 7 to win a series, this year's Knicks or last year's?
I mean, look, probably neither, but I know you want me to answer the question. I would say this year's Knicks because you need stars to win. And last year's Knicks team, I think what's gone on with people's perceptions of last year's team versus this year's team all has to do with expectations. All has to do with expectations. So last year, you guys beat the Philadelphia 76ers, the gutless Philadelphia 76ers in 6, and then you lost to an Indiana team that you were better than, but you got ravaged by injuries in 7. This Knick team would destroy either of the two teams that the 24 Knicks got by, or one of the teams they got by, the other one they lost in 7. So let's start right there. Your expectations were different. Even though you had a high seed and you had home court, you're playing Joel Embiid, you're playing the Sixers. Like, you don't know what to expect. You've only won one round of the postseason. So I think a lot of how we lionized last year's team was just about the expectations that they had compared to this year. And also, they were feisty, but they weren't as talented. This team is a lot more talented. Are you kidding me? I mean, you've got Karl-Anthony Towns, who I know in big spots can disappear at times and is not the greatest defensive player. But, I mean, the guy can go 30 and 20 at any moment, Right. So I think it's not even close when it comes to talent. And so I think the difference between last year's Knicks and this year's Knicks more than anything is simply perception. Remember, the Knicks, Knick team has struggled against 3 elite teams. The 2 teams you beat last year were not elite. This Knick team would smoke the 76ers or Tyrese Halliburton and the Indiana Pacers. It wouldn't even be close, those 2 series.
Well, they were up 2-0 until OG got hurt, and I think that's part of the allure of last year is that we were robbed of having that shot against Boston because of the injuries. So that keeps that team last year on a pedestal because there's that what if factor of like the leaving the bench year with the Knicks and the Heat. It's like we never got our shot at Chicago, so like we'll never know, So it's kind of like you hold that one in your pocket, and you're just like, damn.
But be honest. Be honest. I know you don't want to do this, but I really want you to try to get that truth serum. Let's say Jalen doesn't get hurt. All right. Let's say you guys win Game 7. don't you realize that the Boston Celtics would have completely destroyed you?
Once OG's hurt, yeah, it was over. Once OG got hurt, it was over. But if OG's healthy and they're healthy, I think the Knicks would have given the Celtics a series and taken it the distance. I really do. I think that team was on a roll and they were on a mission. And the Celtics hadn't won yet, so they weren't, battle tested like they are now with the confidence that they are, that the champions. And they really didn't play anybody in the East last year. Everybody was injured, and that's another to your first point that while you're on the show from yesterday on WFAN was that anything can happen in the playoffs. And look what happened with the Celtics. I know they were the 1 seed, but like every team they played was hurt, from the Bucks to the Pacers. Like, seriously, it was insane.
I think back 2 years earlier and I heard you celebrating after Miami beat Milwaukee, thinking it was going to be easy pickings.
Yeah.
And look what happened.
My boy, I was like, I got it.
So you're right. Like, crazy crap happens in the NBA playoffs sometimes.
Yeah.
What do you make of Killian Hayes' ball penetration, Evan?
Oh my God. They bring in Killer Killian to really get the tank going.
We're talking about the Nets for Knicks fans who don't know who he is.
Are you rooting for the Nets to win or lose?
Bro, I am so mixed about this. Like when Claxton hit the game winner against Philly, like my stomach was excited and I was angry. And then watching the Wizards game on Monday, I finally went in and said, screw it, let's make the play-in tournament. Screw it, let's have fun. Right. And for them to come out and play with that dog crap effort, even though they came back and they took the lead and they just didn't execute in the final few minutes, I was actually bothered. I was actually annoyed. So I'm a very conflicted Net fan. I would argue this is the worst season in the history of our franchise because we have that confliction. We haven't had that in past years because usually someone else owns our pick. So it's pretty easy. Just try to win games. We don't have the pick anyway. So this has been a horrible season to watch. I can't wait for it to be over. We're obviously not going to win the lottery, God knows. And I don't even know what Sean Marks has up his sleeve. So the only thing we can root for is for the demise of the New York Knicks. That's all we have going for ourselves right now.
There's been 2 losses this year by the Nets where I actually felt like emotion of anger. It was one yesterday, although it went away faster than it has in the past. The first one was the home loss versus the Pistons earlier in the season, but now
you didn't like that Knick loss either. With
then that's true, and the Knick and both Knick losses, and both those don't even
especially
count.
The block one. That was a tough loss,
and the Knick losses, and both losses.
That one is so far and away the worst loss of the season, and I guess I'm being biased. I was at the Garden. I'm in my season ticket. I brought my oldest son Jet to his first Madison Square Garden Knicks game. Of course, the Nets are playing, and when they took the lead, the joy in his face was, are we really going to beat the Knicks? And I'm like, we got a shot. And as Jalen hit that shot, and then, bro, that was a freaking nightmare walking out of Madison Square Garden that night. Except every Knick fan, they're very nice to me. All they said that night to me was, you think Alonzo's coming back? You think we're getting Soto? I was like, all right, good. Let's change the subject. I like that. That's better.
I don't even count those. I don't even count those ones because in my head I'm like the Knick ones, but the other ones, I just trying to get them out of my brain, I guess. Those Knick losses, but it was those were tough. And then even the one at Barclays Center, Cam Johnson had a good look for 3 and almost pulled off the upset, getting the win there. But it has been just a brutal season in the sense of they're kind of lost in the middle and.
They didn't go full tank. That was their problem. They didn't go full tank.
And the problem is, and this is nothing extraordinary, but when you're going to trade away your the Phoenix picks to get your own picks back, you have to go full tank in like that. That is a crucial mistake. A crucial mistake.
Well, okay. So when I hear this, they haven't gone full tank. We got to go piece by piece. Number one. I don't begrudge them for not trading Cam Johnson if they didn't get the package back that they thought maybe he would net during the offseason. Now, that's a risk that you take because we all saw what happened with DFS, with Dorian Finney-Smith, and what they could have gotten a year ago and what they ended up getting. So I'm not saying I blindly trust Sean Marks, but I'm not going to rip him for just trading a guy for the sake of trading them to get worse. Like, you got to get the most value back. That's number one. Where I would criticize him, and I love D'Angelo Russell, he has the right attitude, but getting back D'Angelo Russell, getting back a more helpful player to your team when you're trading a guy off doesn't make any sense. So I think the idea of taking Russell back and not just buying him out or waiving him was a big mistake. Obviously, he's hurt now, so I guess it doesn't matter, but that contributes to a few extra wins. So that would be my big criticism towards Sean Marks in terms of not going, quote unquote, full tank. They were sitting Cam Johnson a lot with this injury.
Yeah.
Cam Thomas obviously hasn't played in a long time. So they have really tried to kind of not play all their guys. The problem is Jordi Fernandez can really coach. And I think what's hurt the tank is that they have themselves a real head coach, which is good news in the long run, but it's not good news in the short run when you're looking to rack up losses.
See, I disagree with the full tank comment that you made because I can make a Knicks point here just so fans can understand. The Towns year when you're trying to tank for Towns, the Knicks, Melo had his knee injury. The Knicks finally had one of their picks in the few years they did in that era, and the Phil Jackson, for all his terrible moves, they just dumped everybody. It wasn't Phil Jackson, whoever it was in charge. I don't remember, but he didn't trade the pick, so they still had that pick, and the Knicks just dumped everybody. They traded J.R. Smith and Iman Shumpert for Lance Thomas. And they just got rid of everybody. Melo had to get his knee surgery. Of course, he had to wait for the All-Star game, of course, priorities. And then they sat him down, and then they just went into they were starting Langston Galloway. They just went into full, we need to suck, to the point that even at the end of the year, Langston Galloway got hot, and it cost them maybe the number one pick to get Towns, but they ended up getting Porzingis, who the story, ended up being the trade that sparked this run that they're in now. So that's where I think I disagree, where it's just dump D'Angelo, just dump Cam Johnson, just get as bad as you possibly can, just to get if that's the objective of the season, to get the number one pick and get generational players.
Then
yeah,
I agree with that, but what we're forgetting is that this head coach has gotten something out of Tyrese Martin. This head coach has gotten something out of Zaire Williams. This head coach has gotten something recently out of Trenton Watford. These guys are playing for their NBA lives. Jordi Fernandez, obviously, I don't know what goes through his brain if you gave him truth serum. Is his attitude, look, I want to win. It's going to be on my resume no matter what. I'll worry about the roster next year. I'm not sure what he thinks about, what's going through his mind. But I think what you're leaving out is, you're right about the Russell thing. I agree. They could have waived him or just not acquired him. But what about the fact that this head coach is getting so much out of guys who are battling for their NBA lives? It's not automatically they're trying to lose. Guys are trying to win. They're trying to compete. And so it's not as simple as that.
And that's a part that, and I always think the great teams have great ownership, GM and coach all on the same page, aligned with the mission of what we want to do, however it is to get there. And when they're great at what they do, it works. Do you think that Marks and Jordi are on the same page together? And that's the part I can't figure out.
Well, okay. If you are a coach that's a part of a tank, but you're also there early on in the tank, so you're going to be there for a while, you're going to be there when things recover, what are you supposed to do when you're coaching a young player or coaching a player who's a borderline G League player? Are you not supposed to coach them? Are you supposed to say, I don't really give a crap, just go on the court and chuck threes? What are you supposed to do? When the Nets come out with no effort against the Washington Wizards, should Jordi Fernandez not call a timeout and not bench his entire starting five? So I think that's the juxtaposition Net fans are not understanding. It's one thing, the point you made, Alex, about Russell and Cam, that's totally fair. I get that. It's a different discussion. But let's go deeper into who's playing and what the hell you want Jordi Fernandez to do. I mean, I don't think people understand that. I sit next to Tiki every day, and he used to talk about this during the whole Giant thing with Giant fans wanting to tank. No NFL player is going out on a field and not trying hard. And the same goes in the NBA. Guys may not try hard, but they're usually the ones who already have the big fat checks. If you are a borderline, if you're Tyrese Martin, what do you think you're doing on an NBA court? You're leaving your guts out there.
You want that contract. Yeah, you want a real contract.
I think you're underrating this Net roster, Evan. I think they've got loaded talent, and you're giving too much credit to Jordi and not Sean. No, I hear you. It's fair. If you were Evan to start a Nets podcast, what would be the player's name that you would choose for that said podcast?
It would be the Tony Massenberg.
Ooh.
Number 45. Number 44. 44. Sorry.
Look at you. Or maybe the Armin Gilliam.
No,
I could go with that.
Random. Yeah.
Yeah, I love. Well, I'm trying to think. Rico Brogna was my favorite.
Yinka Dare, maybe.
Oh, I couldn't stand Yinka. See that goes the other
mainstream.
way.
Too mainstream.
Too many people know who he is. Should I go with the Chris Gatling? How about the Chris Gatling?
Ooh, I like
All-star,
that. I think that's the one. How about for the Jets then?
How about the Robert Pack? Remember Robert Pack?
That's our guy. We talk about him all the time on the show. Actually,
love Robert Pack, Evan, because the Nets got Robert Pack, who was then traded for Sam Cassell, who was then
That's
traded
right.
for Marbury, who was then traded for Jason Kidd. So
I
I think
know.
you
It
could
was
go
our
with the
point.
Robert Pack.
Yeah.
It was our point guard odyssey that we went on. The
Yeah.
Jet one's a little bit more obvious. I have a love and affinity for Mo Lewis because I think he's been disrespected in NFL history.
Absolutely.
And so I would, without a doubt, call it the Mo Lewis just to honor him. I have his jersey. I wear it at least once a year. I think he was a hell of a Jet who gets crucified for doing his job. And
Thank
that
you.
bothers me.
Thank you. I have his jersey too, and I wear it at the Jet games as well. And I get so mad that they look at him as if Tom Brady wasn't going to beat Drew Bledsoe out for the starting job at some point, like maybe even later that season or the next year. You know, I know they'd have one less Super Bowl, but big whoop, they won like 1 million. You know, who cares? You know, Mo Lewis should be in the Ring of Honor. He should be. You know, he's one of the best Jets defensive players of all time. So
His name should not just be connected with opening up the Tom Brady dynasty. I mean, the guy made a football play. Unfortunately, Drew Bledsoe got hurt. Like, it is what it is.
I agree.
Evan Roberts, WFAN host, and of course, the Rico Bronya podcast, which you can find everywhere. Do a fantastic job with that. Evan, you said right before you jumped on here, final one from me, you would have been listening to a podcast if you were not recording with us. What would you have been listening to?
Well, I'd be listening to Bad Weather Fans, or I'd be listening to any other Knick podcast where they're crying like babies. I love to drink Knick fans' tears. It gives me great joy. I admit I'm a loser. Biseglia will admit he's a loser. Our team is going nowhere. And so Met fans out there, and I know, Alex, you're a Met fan. You could relate to this. Yeah. There were many, many years in our lifetime in which our team was terrible, but all we lived for were Yankee tears, okay? That's where we are in basketball history, and I hope it changes. I hope we win the lottery. I hope we're back to relevance soon. But right now, it's all about drinking those Knick fan tears, baby.
And you know, I forgot who brought it up. I think it was Doug Norrie on the Nets podcast he does. He said the Nets shouldn't have hired Jordi Fernandez now. They should have hired him a few years ago and hired Steve Nash now. Like, they hired the coaches at the wrong time.
They got it backwards. That's a good point. Yes.
Unfortunately true. All right, Bad Weather fans. Yeah. Evan, we appreciate your time, man. Drive safe, and we'll listen to you on the air this afternoon. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.